from the BBC World Service in association with ABC and All India Radio. This is Stumped.
Hello and welcome to Stumped, your intercontinental hit of news, features and debate from the quirky world of cricket. I'm Alison Mitchell in London, where we're in a tier 2 of lockdown now, which means that can't go out and see friends and family in indoor venues, can still meet outdoors at the moment here. So I'm glad that there's a blue sky, stunning autumnal day at the moment. So it's also been a busy week with the Cricket Writers Club Awards coming out, and it looks as if the England men's team could be heading to South Africa for a tour in the autumn. So some things happening in cricket.
You better come to Sydney, New South Wales, the premier state. We've got the Indians coming here. No pineapples or bananas up in Queensland. They're going to come here to play their early matches before we get into the test season. Well, that's what we hope will happen. And at the same time, very good news for women's cricket, because the WT20, which was played earlier this year, has been named as Australia's event, not just sports event of the year. So it's all looking good down under. Well, if you live in New South Wales.
Well, I hope there's no slip between the cup and the lip for that Indian tour to Australia, Jim. Hello, this is Charu Sharma for All India Radio in Bangalore once again. I continue to travel on this golf project of mine. I'm glad to be back home for Stumped. Alison, it's all very confusing about your lockdown and unlockdown and whatever else. But in Bangalore, I think we've kind of given up. And even though masks are still the rigor, we've got a fine in case you're in public and not wearing a mask. But otherwise, it's almost, too much traffic on the road and everything else before COVID. However, cricket-wise, all eyes continue to be on the IPL. I just heard or read something about sort of Ganguly saying that they've had an incredible response on television, so good for the IPL. But, we're still waiting for a little bit of women's cricket action in our part of the world. I feel a little sorry for the women so far.
Oh, well, the Challenger event will be happening, won't it? The IPL game. Some of the women I know from England who are involved, saw Danny Wyatt and Sophie Ecclestone post photographs of them on the aeroplane heading out to the UAE for that. So that'll be exciting to watch. But yeah, our COVID restrictions are very much regionalised at the moment, Charu. So you have to be very on the ball as things change and adapt. And you've got to know what area you're in and what you are and aren't allowed to do. It gets a little bit confusing. But good to know that things are heading in the right direction, it seems, in Australia. But Charu, I do want to mention the race for the playoff places in the IPL, because that's really hotting up, isn't it? We had Shikhar Dhawan scoring back-to-back centuries, the first batter to do that in IPL history. Delhi Capitals, the table toppers, lost out to Kings 11 Punjab. And then what happened here? RCB thrashing KKR, and KKR absolutely crumbled. RCB only needed 85 to win.
Yeah, that was one odd match for the KKR, though it was no fun losing so badly. But they are a team in trouble now, especially with the loss of their regular captain, Dinesh Karthik. Yes, Morgan has taken over, and maybe that might change their fortunes, but they are in trouble, as are some other teams. But you mentioned Kings 11 Punjab, and they, for some, I suppose I always go for the underdog, don't I? I have an old habit. They've done very well to somehow cling on to a miraculous hope of making the Final Four, but they are in trouble. CSK in huge trouble. Well, that's new. And, of course, Dhoni's taking a lot of flack for that. But great that the Delhi Capitals are right on top, because they've never won the IPL. And you might remember my saying on Stumped, always plugging for the underdog, that there's a new winner for a change. We're tired of seeing the same names on that trophy. So hopefully it's the Delhi Capitals this time, but we'll see, because the knockout can come up with a few surprises. But there are teams in the middle. I think there's maybe one spot, which is the fourth, where there'll be a huge fight. But there has been a fairly decent separation of the points. So, that's never great for a league, because you want all teams to be in it. I think CSK are not in it. Punjab are struggling. A couple of the teams, KKR, may not make it. And, of course, RCB springing a bit of a surprise by suddenly becoming at least contenders for the Final Four, if not for the title, which also they've never won.
Yeah, that's it. It's exciting, isn't it, when different teams and new stories rise up to the top. Jim, talking of, rising to the top, Tim Payne, the Australian captain, scored a rare century in the Sheffield Shield. I remember him scoring one last season in the lead up to the Test summer, and it was hailed as really significant then, because that was only his second ever first-class 100, and now he's got another with an Indian series coming up.
Yes, there's a few torpid surfaces there in Adelaide where they're staging the Sheffield Shield, and two high-scoring draws, which Tim Payne was involved in, one of them against South Australia. Well, perhaps the most remarkable thing about the game was that in a score of almost 500, The South Australian Chad Sayers bowled 27 overs for 29 runs and took 3 wickets. But there were hundreds all over the place. Tim Payne, one of them. And in the other match between New South Wales and Western Australia, keep your eye on this fella. I mean, if you're an environmentalist, you will anyway, because his name is Green. Cameron Green. He's 20 and he scored 197. And I would not be surprised if he's in the Australian Test team within the next couple of months. He's an outstanding talent, but very batsman-friendly pitches down there, and Tim Payne took his chance.
From the BBC World Service, this is Stumped on All India Radio.
I had the pleasure this week of announcing an award for Jason Holder, the West Indies Test captain, on behalf of the Cricket Writers Club, who represent the cricket media primarily in the UK, but overseas members as well, of course. But Holder and his team are winners of the Peter Smith Award that recognises outstanding contribution to the presentation of cricket to the public. West Indies were, of course, the first international team to travel to England at the height of the coronavirus pandemic. Holder leading his team into the unknown somewhat, but he also showed great leadership in calling for racial equality and unity. Players and staff from both sides taking a knee before the first test in July. That gesture continued throughout the West Indies series and England's white ball matches against Ireland, which were their first of the season. However, when Pakistan and Australia toured England later in the summer, that pre-match ritual was abandoned, and Holder believes that cricket missed an opportunity to keep taking a lead on fighting racism.
I personally was a bit disappointed to see how Pakistan and Australia tours had went on after us, and they're not showing their solidarity afterwards. But yeah, it's a long debate, it's a long, hard challenge, it's a long road, and I think we as people, we just need to continue to come together, put our minds together, and genuinely find ways to fix the inequalities in the world. As I said, it's not an overnight fix. This is something that is going to be ongoing for maybe a number of years. But I think the most important thing and the message that needs to be pushed home is that, we need to come together. We need to see each other as all equal human beings and treat each other that way, and more or less, be your brother's keeper in this world.
But how are conversations going amongst players at the IPL? Are conversations happening?
To be honest, I haven't had one conversation up here around it. Sometimes it seems as though it's gone unnoticed, which is a sad thing. I guess it's, again, for us to re-highlight the importance of it, and for people just to understand what is happening in the world.
From the BBC World Service, this is Stumped on All India Radio.
OK, let's take some time for the three of us to kick around another topic that has come to the fore this week, and that is about countries playing 2 formats of the game at the same time. Now, I know there were very separate test and white ball squads for England's COVID summer over here, but at the start of 2021, England and Australia will most likely have separate international teams in completely different countries playing separate series at the same time. England are in advanced talks with Pakistan over a T20 series, and that would take place in January, when they're also scheduled to be playing test matches in Sri Lanka. Well, one person who isn't happy is the famously patriotic Australia coach Justin Langer. He says he doesn't like it at all, saying he doesn't want to ever have 2 Australian teams playing at the same time. He says, we're one country, aren't we? The counter-argument, though, is also pretty persuasive, because the biggest source of revenue for international teams is a tour by one of the big 3 nations of India, Australia and England. That's because of the high premium on selling those matches to broadcasters. And, we are in parlous financial times. If those rich and powerful countries can be in 2 places at once, then is that not a way of spreading the wealth?
It's all about television and revenue. And as long as they rule the world of sport, you'll have decisions like this. The only way you're going to stop it, and it's not going to happen, is to have no T20 played by countries, only by IPL and every other franchise around the place. And that's not going to happen. So I'm sorry, it's inevitable. We're already moving towards having separate identities, playing T20, white ball cricket to some extent, although there's more of an overlap with the one-dayers and the test team. So unfortunately for Justin Langer, I think it's inevitable. It's just the shape of the game. It demands to get money from somewhere, and this is a perfect way to do it. So as long as television, as I say, is running sport, this will happen.
Well, television is, of course, a very important commercial arm of sport, Jim. But, I do feel that the top few teams have enough talent to have at least 2, if not 3, national teams. And I know this is not new because there are, say, the A tours. Now, India A goes and plays somewhere else, and they're perfectly capable of playing against some of the, no disrespect, lesser nations in cricket and yet come out on top. So this, in a sense, is already happening with the A tours. If it were to happen legitimately, as in the Indian team going to a lesser nation, which may have only 1 or 2 of the major stars, because there's no point sending a team that the locals are not aware of. So if India is playing in, say, Ireland or any other smaller nation, or Malaysia, which, of course, I think the bigger teams owe these smaller nations, then it's possible for just 1 or 2 stars to be a part of the team and yet go and represent India. Because if that's going to churn local interest and get some kind of local revenue and take the game forward, I think the players need to understand that the game will always be, this is going to sound very cliched, the game will always be bigger than just the players. So to my mind, it's a very effective way forward to create a little bit of sporting interest, if not commercial interest, in the lesser nations by having the major nations go with a separate team. But I will add a caveat that, there should be at least 1 or 2 hugely recognizable people in those teams. Otherwise, it might defeat the purpose.
Well, this is the issue. Which team do which players play in? Different countries have different arrangements, don't they, contractually between test teams and so on. And it's easy at the moment to say, for example, with England, that they would send sort of their full strength test team, as what happened in the summer. And then those who didn't make the test team, if they're also white ball players, can play in the white ball matches. But what happens when, for example, this is in the lead up to a T20 World Cup? Are the Ben Stokes and Jos Butlers going to be content to go and play in a test series when they really want to be gearing up for the T20 World Cup, and T20s are happening at the same time? Is this the start of a slippery slope towards eventually the test teams becoming depleted?
I think so, yes. I mean, look what's happened in rugby in the last 7 or 8 years. You have definitive 15-a-side players and also 7-a-side players. Completely different structures. And they don't have the franchise system that cricket has with T20. But I think there'll be more specialisation, yes. And the players will go to where the money is. It's quite simple, really.
And if
it's gone on ever since they invented the apple, I think.
And if a player wants to put themselves in the frame for the IPL, they'll want to be playing international T20 cricket when there's an opportunity to be on a platform.
Are we going to leave it to the players to choose, or are there selectors for different teams in different formats? So I really think you have to leave it to the selectors and their wisdom of choosing those who are most capable for one format and not the other, and then go with it. If you have a problem, step out and play hockey or whatever. I mean, come on, let somebody run the game, because yes, the players are the stars, but so often we have a selection problem, don't we? A sort of a rock and a hard place about, oh gosh, how do we choose 14 people to go when there are 25 candidates? So choose the ones who are in best form, or whichever other criteria you're using, and the others who always land up cribbing about the fact that they weren't selected, or of course it creates a huge social media storm about their lack of selection, can certainly represent the country in either a different form with a different country at the same time. So the more the merrier, but the overarching concept is to aid the development of cricket in other nations, which is suffering. I mean, India, Australia, England, maybe a bit of South Africa, a couple other countries, and nobody's really interested in. I mean, very famously, Jim, when was the last time Australia went to Bangladesh or Bangladesh to Australia? I mean, come on, they're a reasonably strong, enthusiastic cricketing nation, but such few opportunities with the bigger teams.
I agree with all of that, but there's 365 days in the year, and it just doesn't seem to be enough time to play against everybody in every competition in T20 one-day cricket and test matches. So that's the commercial reality when you've got particularly the major countries getting at least 95%, if not now 100% of their revenue from television deals. And maybe the ICC have got, in order to sustain the game, to give out more of their largesse to the countries that need it. But you've got a big problem now, since Afghanistan and Ireland have also come into the top league, of making this thing work. And it's not working. And we're about to see that with the alleged staging of the World Test Championship. Now they've had to halve the points or something to try and come up with an outcome in time for a final.
Well, maybe the lure of the World Test Championship is a reason why countries will still try to pick their strongest Test team first. But there's an issue around, isn't it, the product of Test cricket. If you get to a stage where countries are playing each other without their strongest suits, when you compare the two, which products will suffer more from, say, A teams playing? I mean, Test cricket over 5 days, you need and want the best against the best for those one-on-one duels to really draw you in the intensity of the battles. Whereas you can argue that a 2020 can still be entertaining with players who are less heralded and over a shorter period of time isn't impacted as much in terms of the quality of the product as a test match can be if you take away those top tier of players. So there's the essence of the quality of the product to think about. But then on the flip side, I can also see, Jim, the point about, yes, developing the game. And say if Afghanistan was still going to Australia this summer, which unfortunately they're not, but would they have had more of a competitive game of cricket against an Australian A team than if they actually took on the likes of Cummins and Stark and Warner?
Definitely. But look, the interesting bit of history, if I can just go back. When Sri Lanka became a test nation, they had no structured 3 or 4 day cricket in their country. And yet they produced some remarkable test cricketers. So I think we're going to get to a stage with so much congestion in the schedule, it's just not going to work. Financially, it's not viable. And in terms of the schedule, it's just too punishing.
From the BBC World Service, this is Stumped on All India Radio.
Well, that's it for this week's Stumped on All India Radio. You can keep in touch with the show throughout the week on Twitter using the hashtag BBC Stumped. Thanks to my co-hosts, Charu Sharma and Jim Maxwell, and to you for listening. Stay safe and join us again next time. Bye-bye.
Stumped is a BBC sport production for the BBC World Service in association with the Australian Broadcasting Corporation and All India Radio.